so far. Which way then, as we are expecting an 18% VAT up from the 16% that we have?
Good question. Actually, that's the dilemma that the taxman is in. Two things. So one, when you look at taxes in totality, they are made up of different taxes. There's tax on income or tax on profits. Mm-hmm. That's on income, salaries, profits, from corporates. We have VAT, which is largely a tax on goods and services. Mm-hmm. We would also have your import taxes, the customs and the excise tax. So if we analyze each, an increase in income tax definitely has a negative impact on the spending power. Mm-hmm. And therefore that has a knock-on effect onto the other taxes.
All right.
You spend less, you pay less VAT, you pay less excise, so they'll be reduced, and there would also be subdued investment. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And reduced tax collection then for the taxman. So Winnie, then, because looking at across the East African region, it is budget day for all East African countries, and Kenya's 16% VAT is the lowest in the region, with the rest of the countries, Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi at 18%. This is where we're headed, really. But talk to us about tax evasion and whether we should go the 1990s way. Back when Musalia Mudavadi was the then finance minister, I understand the government oversaw the reduction by half of income tax as well as corporate tax, and that move saw the economy grow the fastest at a constant of 45%. Should Kenya then consider reducing taxes with an aim of increasing revenue allocation, or revenue collection rather?
Thank you, Michelle. Just to answer your question, an increase in taxes most definitely will lead to tax evasion. Mm-hmm. But I don't foresee tax evasion being the major concern here. I'd like to give you a case example. Section 23 of the Income Tax Act is very categorical. Actually, there's a difference between tax evasion and tax avoidance. Mm-hmm. So if you look at it this way, if you increase the taxes, then most definitely people will shy away and they'll be looking for tax avoidance. Mm-hmm. Which is essentially like tax planning to ensure that you pay lesser taxes. But Section 23 and some provisions of the Tax Procedures Act have already illegalized tax avoidance in itself. So you cannot take advantage of the double taxation treaties, or you cannot do tax structuring so as to reduce your tax liability. So what does that mean for Kenya? It means that you're going to be driving out investors out of the country, whereas you should be looking forward to inviting them to the table so that they can give you more revenue. Mm-hmm. Case example, Procter and Allen. They no longer do, Procter and Gamble, sorry. They no longer do their production in Kenya, because even the manufacturing of sanitary towels itself was very expensive. So they have to ship the production plant from Kenya to Egypt, where there's low cost of production. Mm-hmm. And we've seen that with many multinationals who have shifted their base from Kenya to other regions where the production cost is very low. So what in essence we're trying to say is, I don't think that increasing the taxes in Kenya is going to give the much anticipated effect or the much anticipated revenues. Mm-hmm. It has to go way more than those dynamics of increasing taxes. Mm-hmm. So I think we have to look at it from the broader spectrum. What is it that we can do to our environment? And if we actually look down and narrow down into the big four agendas like agriculture, I think we can advise more on that.
All right. So that is the taxation angle. But let's take a look at, for example, the borrowing angle. Christopher, we have borrowing, and then we have an expanded government that we're still financing. So Kenya loses about a third, however, of its annual budget to corruption alone. When you equate that to this year's budget, that would be about 1 trillion shillings then lost in corruption. Members of Parliament have proposed, instead of increasing taxes, let's seal the loopholes that allow billions and trillions of monies to be lost in corruption. Would that, however, help bridge at least the deficit that we have in the budget? Yes,
and let me put it this way. Now, in addition to corruption, there is pure wastage. And austerity measures are there to cut back unnecessary spending. Mm-hmm. So that, when you add corruption, makes it worse. So we are talking about a deficit of 607 billion. But remember, we also have pending bills. So we are talking about, by the time we are getting into this year, we already owe businessmen, billions. I think it was 400 billion. So when you add that, because that's an owing in accounting terms, we are talking of a deficit of almost $1 trillion. Now you're talking about a business community that first is crowded out of the credit because the government is participating a lot in local borrowing.
Right.
So they don't have local. They cannot. They are crowded out of credit. They are owed by the government. So even when it comes to tax collection, you're looking at a subdued business community that is unlikely to pay, taxes as would be expected, because business is likely to go down, and income taxes composing of about 48% of the total revenue collected by the KRA, that would have a major effect. So that's number one. So when it comes to corruption and stealing wastage, that should generate internally funds to cut back.
If we're speaking of a deficit of 600 billion and we're losing close to $1 trillion shillings, then the deficit has been bridged and then some. But already as we're speaking, Kenya has already borrowed another Eurobond at, is it 2.1 billion shillings and another 75 billion shillings loan from the World Bank, all this in less than a month. Willie, there has been an ongoing conversation on pegging our borrowing only on the ability to repay what we borrow. But Kenya seems to have an insatiable appetite for borrowing for big projects that are likely to be more beneficial to the citizen in the long term. But what about the short term? So let's talk about our borrowing and how we can reduce that to bridge the deficit.
First of all, Michelle, I'd like to pick up from where he left on matters of tax evasion on matters of corruption and what the government can do. To bring it into perspective, I'd like to tell you that we already have Kenyan Anti-Bribery Act, which is similar to what the UK have, the UKBA, UK Bribery Act. And we've seen the government enforcing so very many acts and legislative measures that are meant to curb corruption, including the Leadership Act, which was brought about as a result of the UN, which was mandatory for Kenya to embrace. But the question really is, are we really enforcing these acts? And whose responsibility is it to see that corruption has been curbed? I think the legislature is really trying. I can see the president is really having nice measures to curb corruption, but are we really going to enjoy the fruits? That aside, the insatiable nature for debt, for sure, I can tell you, we're even going to expect more of it this year. And I get back to my point. Do we have the ability to pay? Right. And do you think the ability to pay is going to come from the already overtaxed people who are in the formal sector? What about bringing the people who are not largely taxed in the informal sector? Because as we also look at borrowing, we must also look at how we are going to finance the debt in the future. And as you said, in the short term, I do not see any measures, for example, that the government has put in place to ensure that they realize the revenue. I'll give you an example. In the Finance Act 2018, and this is a very huge allegation that I saw in the budget policy statement that was published by the Treasury, they actually talked about the Finance Act 2018 policy measures contributing largely to the deficit. Like, apparently they're expecting that the measures they put in 2018 are going to help them meet the deficit. But the question is, has the presumptive tax at the rate of 15% that was brought about by the Finance Act 2018, has it already gone? Is it already effective? I was at one of the county government offices early in January, and when you're applying for your business permit, the only requirement that you were supposed to have is maybe you get your health license and you get your every other license, but on presumptive tax, I saw no one paying presumptive tax. So I think taxes have largely over the time been a burden for the people in the formal sector, which is ideally the employed. But what happens for the largely untaxed informal sector? And we're still talking about more borrowing when we cannot collect enough to repay, even for the short term. I think it's far much a goal that is unachievable. Very
pertinent issues there being raised. And Christopher, then the concern or focus then would be to look at how to create more jobs and how to generate wealth among the informal sector as well, which makes up a large chunk of the Kenyan population. Has the Kenyan government, however, done enough with their promises for job creation to ensure that they will meet their revenue collection targets, because enough Kenyans have jobs?
Yeah, well, Kenya has a demographic dividend in that it has a very young, educated population. But let us look at what has happened to that demographic. Nothing. So while we we should be having deliberate measures to have the young, get into either formal or informal employment. Two things. One, we should be competing with India when it comes to business process outsourcing. We should be having deliberate measures to attract your, back office work here into Kenya. People who can work, night to send work to, the Western, countries. That's number one. Number two, still going to my first point of, agriculture contributing or being 35% of the GDP. Now, we should be having measures deliberately targeted at agriculture, value addition, and pulling this youth to agriculture. So we should have targeted incentives to agro-processing, manufacturers. Now, the other day, we got a market for avocados, but there was a hitch because there are insects and, what do you call it? They're insects, so they need to be, to have some standards when they go to the other countries. We have local companies here that have the capability to fumigate that. We should target those ones because with one go, you open up, a wide or an economy that reaches a lot of the people, and that way it's felt. Because the question now is, we have a growth for whom? That's the question that is on everyone's lip.
All right, all right. And as we wind up this conversation, I'm glad you brought up agriculture because it has been allocated 59.1 billion shillings from the current budget. There are those who have concerns that the government has largely focused that allocation, however, to large-scale farmers and those in the export sector, completely forgetting the small-scale farmer who produces about 70% of the food in the country. Winnie, as we wind up, talk to us about that.
I'm very happy that you brought it up because it's a pertinent issue for me and I'm very passionate about agriculture when you speak about it. First of all, let's acknowledge that agriculture in the recent economic survey contributed to about 34.2% to our GDP, which is huge. And actually, it was categorized as one of the growers of the economy. It has always been our mainstay, as one of the MPs said actually in the interview. But then again, the question is, what is it that the government is doing to ensure that the small-scale farmer also benefits from the tax policies? I'll just give you a highlight of what I saw in the budget policy statement, that the government is looking forward to, more concentrating on the potato production, meat production, processed milk, and rice production. And one of the most amazing things, and also cotton, one of the most amazing things that I saw is that the government is going to allocate about 100 acres to NYS so that they can revamp cotton production in the country. And apparently they have commercialized a certain generic of cotton seeds. But the question is, so what if you give the money and you allocate the money to the Gulana Kulalu project and you give it over to NYS? What happens to the farmer? What incentives are you giving to the farmer? And it goes on and on, as Christopher is saying, for the production chain, value addition. And an example would be, you're also looking forward to, revamping the blue economy, whereby it's fishing and, illegalizing people from other countries coming into our territories and fishing from there. But really, what's the value that you're getting? Some of the facilities that we could be talking about is cold storage facilities. When we look at it's only one company, and which is based in Mombasa, that has cold storage facilities. We're talking about Southern Shipping Services Limited. They're the only company that has done cold storage facilities in large scale. But what has the government really done to give tax incentives to people and encourage Winnie and Christopher and Michelle to invest actually in cold storage facilities? And one of the things would be actually reducing the tax rate. So if you have a cold storage facility that can manage to store like 5 tons, why don't you get a reduced rate of tax to be 20% from the 30%? Why don't you get investment deductions? And again, for grain storage, and please allow me to speak about this. I remember in the last financial year, the government exempted the construction materials for grain storage facilities. However, you have to get approval from the cabinet secretary in charge for agriculture and also the treasury one. But the question then begs the question, can Winnie, who's a small-scale farmer, go and what guts or audacity do I have to approach the treasury and ask them, or even the CS for agriculture, and ask them that they're going to exempt the materials which I'm going to buy and build a granary, exempt them from VAT? Of course, it's close to impossible. And then the thing is, they have to come up with incentives, like say, if you construct a granary that's going to hold at least 100,000 bags, then of course you also get a reduced tax incentive or some investment deductions. So we have to build more on our tax incentives.
Very pertinent issues that are being raised, considering that this, for the better part of this year, we've also seen farmers crying foul, especially within the Rift Valley, the country's food basket, of the hardships they are going through really in feeding the country. That is Winnie Kimodo. She is a tax consultant at PKF. Also with us in studio this morning, Christopher Kirathe, who is a tax partner at Ernst & Young. We continue keeping up with the Kenyans' expectations on this year's budget. Let's take you to the inland container depot here in Nairobi, where reporter Lofty Matambo is. Lofty, good morning. What more can you tell us from there?
Good morning, Michelle. This is, as you have stated, the inland container depot that is along Mombasa Road. Remember, export-import is one of the major industries in Kenya, one of the chief industries in Kenya, one of the principal industries in Kenya, where so many Kenyans draw their income from there, as well as the government getting a lot of revenue and tax from the people working here. Now, the elephant in the room is the taxes that have been increasing day in, day out for the past fiscal year. And I've spoken to a few of them, some of them transporters, agents. They are crying of the high taxes that have been witnessed here. Remember, President Uhuru Kenyatta, Michelle, was here a month ago, and he stated that some of the containers that are in here, right behind me, basically this is the gate, the gate that is leading into where the containers are cleared, but there's so many of them that are yet to be cleared, and the directive from President Uhuru Kenyatta is yet to take effect. But again, apart from that, we'll come to that later, Michelle. This is one of the Juakali industries areas in Kenya, whereby you can meet a host of various people working in various industries. Apart from transportation, there are some here who are selling they're selling food to the guys who are working here. There are some who are doing taxi businesses. There are some who are doing boda boda. So I believe that speaking to a few of them, Michelle, as far as this year's budget is concerned, we're going to get a myriad of their expectations from today's budget. As you can see, some of them already on the paper. They're trying to peruse and see what they can grasp, what they can gather from today's budget. You see the headline here is what is giving them kiwewe in Swahili, as they put it. Why rotich will hit on you hard in budget. So let me speak to them so that we can get a few of their insights as far as today's budget or this year's budget is concerned. Hujambo kaka? Yes. Karibu sana, hii ni KTN Live na kuona na pitia pale na kudurusu ile gazeti. Hebu tuambie ni kitu gani umekiona kikakushtua katika gazeti hili? Nitakushikia mikrofoni kaka.
Okay, chenye nimeona hapa.
Nitakushikia mikrofoni, jina lako kwanza?
Mimi ni David Ogega. I'm working here at, as a Amazon, a carpenter, and all of those other fields. Now, today we have come for work. Up to now, we are still waiting. At the end of the day, we'll go home. Now, and here, Rotich is saying we have a budget of 3 trillion. And what I can see here, the last financial year, we only got 1.6 trillion. So I wonder where all this other money will come from. Now, we are out, we are not working. At the end of the day, we'll pay taxes. If you go to the shop, you are deducted. Do
you think Rotich is targeting you as a person, and how?
Yes, he's targeting us. If you go to buy a sugar, there is a value-added tax there. If you go for soap, it's there. And we as the people of Juakali, we are the people suffering, and we are people working hard in this Kenya. Mm-hmm. So we expect them also to consider us. Now, in this budget, as I can see, there's nothing which touches on the Juakali sector. There's nothing.
Great. Yeah. Hold on there. Let me speak to another Kenyan here in the jua kali industry. My cameraman is telling me to switch position. Yes. What's your name? Tell us your name and your expectation of what you've gathered from today's expected budget.
Yes, my name is Shandrak Munyao. Kwa upande wangu naona hii budget haiko sawa juu haija target mwananchi. Ukiangalia kama unga iko juu, kila kitu iko juu, hakuna kazi hivyo. So lazima President Uhuru na rotich waangalie hiyo mambo.
Great. Michelle, let me speak to one of the Kenyans here who looks like an agent or a transporter. Let me just find out. What's your name? Unafanya kazi gani hapa na tuambie maoni yako katika sekta unayofanya kwenye hapa jua kali. Inaweza kuathiriwa vipi na bajeti ya leo kaka?
Okay, my name is David Smith. I'm working here as a clearing agent. Kulingana na bajeti ya leo, tungependa Mr. Rotich aangalie kwa upande ya watu ya chini. Because as a jua kali sectors tunaathirika because so many peoples wana gain kwa pesa zetu za jua kali. Sisi hakuna kitu tunapata. Because ukiangalia ile budget wameka pale, hawajaangalia kwa ile mtu wa chini. Wameconsider tu wale watu wa juu. So tulikuwa tunaomba serikali yetu iangalie because we are Kenya, we are suffering.
Unafanya kama agent wa nini hapa?
Okay, I'm a clearing agent. Yeah, I'm working.
Umelalamika awali kabla kwenda hewani kwamba ushuru umefanya biashara yenu ya maagent kwamba biashara imekuwa chini, mapato pia yako chini na kadhalika. Hebu tueleze kwa mwananchi wa kawaida, huu ushuru uliathiri vipi biashara yenu ya maagenti?
Okay, ushuru umeathiri biashara yetu kwa sababu sasa ukiangalia kazi yetu ya clearing imerudi chini. Kwa serikali imerudi kutukazia sana. Wanajaribu kuangalia watu ya juu, waangalie wale watu wajiri, so watu wa chini. So katika hii kazi yetu tunaathirika sana. Hatujapata ile njia hata ya kuwezi hata peleka mtoto wako shule, ile pesa unapata ni kidogo. Okay. So tunataka jaribu tu serikali tuangalie kwa upande mwingine.
Thank you very much. Michelle, let me walk a little bit to see what is right behind me. As I told you, this is a place where so many people work of various sectors. There's a kibanda here because this serves as a jua kali area as much as also is an inland container depot. So let me see whether I can get a few Kenyans and speak to them. Here is a guy who looks like a transporter using boda boda. Let me talk to him. How are you, sir? My name is Lofty Matambo from KTN News. Tunachukua maoni ya wananchi kuhusu bajeti ya leo. Unaonaje wewe, unatarajia nini kama mwananchi unaifanya jua kali industry?
Niko mbio kidogo.
Uko mbio kidogo? Haya. Wakenya lazima wako kwenye mishemishe Michelle kuweza kutafuta mihela, lakini wacha niingie kwenye kibanda nitamalizia hapa, labda tutapata kikombe cha kahawa kunywa, manake hapa sasa ndo mambo yalipo. Nafikiri mwangaza unatosha pale, ama ataongeza mwangaza mpige picha wangu Murage. Naam, shukrani sana. Wacha nizungumze kwanza na huyu bwana. Hujambo? Anasema nimwache ale kwanza. Naongea na mama ambaye ndo mpishi hapa na mwandalizi. Hujambo mami?
Hujambo.
Nashukuru sana. Mimi naitwa Matambo kutoka KTN News, uko live na tunachukua maoni ya bajeti. Bajeti ya mwaka huu ni trilioni 3 ambapo ni kama tu ya mwaka jana, na wengi wanalia kwamba wanalengwa kukusanya ushuru. Kibanda chako hichi unauza chakula. Je, unaona pia wewe unalengwa kwamba ushuru utapandishwa ili bajeti ile iweze kufanikishwa?
Wacha tuseme ile budget wamepanga kwa hii mwaka tunaona iko juu na itatuumiza sana. Juu kwa maana unga iko juu sana. Tunaona unga iko karibu 150. Sukari nayo iko juu sana, ni 120. Kwa hivyo ile kitu tunapata kwa hii biashara tunapata kitu kadogo. Kwa hivyo hata watoto kusoma ni shida.
Asante sana. Michelle, let me end it there for now, but I'll have to finish it from outside because of the lighting issues and all that. But those are some of the views from Kenyans from various industries. Speaking of jua kali, we are still camping here at the ICD, where later we'll have to speak to some of the agents and also some of the guys who work inside the port to see how taxes have affected them, and we see whether the directive from Uhuru Kenyatta will at least be considered this time round in the budget that is expected to be read later in the afternoon. From me, Lofty Matambo, back to you in studio, Michelle.
Many thanks, Lofty. Lofty is live for us from the Inland Container Depot here in Nairobi. Remember, manufacturing is one of the focus areas for President Uhuru Kenyatta's Big Four agenda. How are they likely to be impacted by this year's budget? We remain to find out later this afternoon. But in studio with me to dissect more what this budget means to us is Osborne Wanyuike, who is an Associate Director at PricewaterhouseCoopers. Good morning and thank you for being with us here on KTN News. So a budget of 3.02 trillion shillings, still less than last year's budget, but a mammoth number nonetheless. The Treasury, however, expects the taxman to deliver 2.2 trillion of this, considering that the taxman is already behind target with the current 1.9 trillion shillings. Let's talk about the possible tax measures that we're likely to see implemented to see this being possible.
Thank you for having me. I think the Cabinet Secretary has quite a difficult task in front of him because, as you know, as you rightly said, the revenue is not performing as it should, below target. But I must also say they were given such a high target. It's not surprising that it wasn't met. But so the minister has two things he can do. He can do administrative things. Administrative things means, better tax administration, making sure that all taxes that are in the book people collect and it's well accounted for. So the administrative things. So within that you have iTax, using electronic or digital ways of keeping up with tax collections. There's also training of KRA officers and making sure that they are up to speed on everything that happens in the world, because the world is changing very fast. So administration is quite a wide issue, but I think that would be the focus of the Cabinet Secretary, to try and improve the administrative part of it. The next thing he could try and change is the legislation. So he could change tax rates, he could bring more people onto the tax net. But if you ask me which of the two options, would he choose? Obviously, he would rather choose the administrative part because it is easier to do and it's within his control. Increasing tax rates impacts everybody. The common mwananchi, it impacts business, it impacts investors. And the way the economy is, I think the minister, I believe he wouldn't want to be too aggressive on tax, increasing tax collection in terms of rates and so on and so forth. The headroom is not there anymore.
Right. But you mentioned there, the 1.9 trillion target that the taxman had been given was already too high. Here we're seeing an increased target of 2.2, being pegged at 2.2. But let's talk about the better tax administration that you say, because tax evasion has also been quite an issue with the KRA's inability to rein in on tax evaders. And there are those who argue if you target the same taxpayer evading, taxes with higher taxes, then you're only encouraging more tax evasion in the country. How then are they likely to go about that? Okay,
so I look at it, tax evasion, it's a crime. So a crime is a crime, and those who participate should be put in. And anything that you've collected illegally should be taken back to the government. So for me, it's quite simple. Tax evasion, we have laws, and quite strong laws, in terms of those who break the law in terms of tax, pay double the tax, and actually can even lose their property and so on and so forth. So that is there in law. I think what is really important is making sure that the government is collecting that which is already in the law. And an example in terms of, there are some people who believe that the government will not catch up with me, isn't it? He will do his biashara, he will do it, and say maybe when the government comes, I will deal with them. Those are long days long gone. With digital iTax, KRA is able to now not only listen to what you say you got in terms of tax that you've paid, but they're also getting third-party people to verify that which you said. So let's look at VAT. If I charge you VAT at 16%, isn't it? You will also claim that you've paid me VAT at 16. Now, iTax is now correlating the two numbers. Did Osborne declare 16? So that you can also claim back your 16%. So digitalization has really helped to bring the numbers together, hit the numbers together, such that you may not be caught today, but the system in the background is generating assessments for you or asking you to reconcile why what you're returning in your returns is not the same as what we are understanding from third
But
party.
how is it then with that very digitalized system that Kenya is still unable to meet a target of 1.9 trillion shillings?
Okay, so let's assume that the budget was well agreed and was a steep budget. That's for sure. Now, the economy has a very important role for KRA to meet its objectives. In other words, what assumptions did they have to get to 1.9 billion? What growth rate was anticipated? That's number one. Number two, was the tax collected properly? Were the laws put in place at the right time? Let me give you an example. Last year they changed some laws on excise duty, but it took quite some time before the laws came on board. So they lost some maybe 3-6 months before the laws started coming on board. Those are 3-6 months of lost revenue. So you can see there will be issues of delays in tax collection. But that does not defeat the purpose for which KRA has been established. KRA needs to go out and understand, educate the people so that they pay the amount of tax. So the 1.9 trillion, yes, they have not met the target. They've been given a steeper target. So we wait and see how they'll do that, because as far as I can see, it will be a very steep target. Unless the economy really balloons in terms of growth rate, which I can't actually see what sector will do that. It will be quite a steep task to reach the amounts that they have been set.
Right, and of course Kenyans are wondering how this is likely to impact them. Let's talk about value-added tax, for example. Yes. This is tax on basic goods and commodities, which stands at 16% already. And as much as Kenyans are complaining, this 16% is the lowest within the East African region, and we're expecting a possible harmonization with the 18% that is common across the East African region. What impact is this likely to have, not just on the Kenyan taxpayer, but on the government itself?
Okay, thank you. Because of my years of experience, I can tell you that the time that Kenya tax rate or VAT was much higher, I think it was 17 or 18%. And when the cabinet secretary at that time reduced the rate to 16, the VAT collections actually increased.
Right.
So from experience, you can actually increase the rate and get lower revenues. Or vice versa, you can actually lower the rate and get more tax revenue. So 16 is a number. Now it's the impact it will have. Now, whether they want to increase it from 16 to a higher rate, I would say that would be not to be like suicide, because who's going to pay it? It's the poor people, it's the businesses. It may dampen business. So 16 is fine. Now, you've talked about harmonization of the rates, maybe 18% to other economies.
Yes.
But the other economies have different assumptions. You have to are we comparing like with like? An economy that's doing 18%, what are its fundamentals? Are they the same as Kenya? So when you say let's harmonize, are we harmonizing for the sake of a number, or are we harmonizing because of the fundamentals of the economy? And therefore, once the fundamentals are the same, then the harmonization will be right. But if just for numbers and without analysis, I don't think that would be a good idea.
All right, and finally, really, the 3 p.m. this afternoon is when Henry Rotich is expected to unveil that budget. What are your expectations as an expert in this?
Straight on, I think I wouldn't expect any tax increases at this time. What I would expect are things to clean up the laws, in terms of there are certain things that happen within the law that are not good and are not helpful for business. So I expect, say, the income tax bill that has been in the draft, maybe now the cabinet secretary will bring it up on for debate in parliament. It has a raft of new changes within the income tax, and that reform will be good. So I expect he might, push on the agenda of the income tax bill, debating it, and that it has certain good things in it. The others that will be debated and see whether it will be good for business. But in terms of transactional taxes, you may find here and there they might increase, but I don't think it will be significant. And also you might find that there are certain powers that have been given to the Commissioner General in terms of increase of inflationary increases on excise. That might also happen around the same time. So I'm not expecting a budget that will have new tax increase in taxes. I'm expecting something that will make life easier for doing business in Kenya. That's what I expect. But I'm not the one holding the
Absolutely,
the
that's what all Kenyans expect, because you know the situation as is has been quite difficult. Osborne Wanyoike is an associate director at Price Waterhouse Coopers, just giving us a lowdown on the expected changes, especially in tax rates that the National Treasury CS is likely outline in the budget this afternoon. Let's wind up News Center this morning, but KTN News continues to give you wall-to-wall coverage of the 2019-2020 budget. Also, several things happening in Parliament this morning. Wafula Chebukati will also be meeting a parliamentary committee on issues IEBC. That and more coming up next on Leo Mashinani with Nick Wambo, who is also live from the precincts of Parliament. My name is Michelle Ngele Odhiambo. Thank you for watching and good morning.